let's move on to this. I'm going to combine these kind of two things because they both have to do with PulseChain liquidity and kind of pumpamentals of the token anyway. So he was talking about how thin the liquidity is on Pulse. And a lot of people are sharing this clip where he says, you know, you can get a giant God candle at any moment. I think a lot of people were keying in on that idea for obvious reasons. And then he also spoke a lot about, and I thought this was really interesting, especially because there was like doubt or controversy whenever this was first announced, and it's relatively new. But anytime seemingly that he mentioned, you know, Pulse X, Hex, pump tires, like pump tires was included, and every single mention of the main tokens, as somebody mentioned earlier, incentive token not mentioned, which we can maybe get to that here. I don't really read anything into that. I'm more so saying it as a joke, but I thought it was interesting, though. He did mention pump tires multiple times, and he loves this idea, rightfully so, and talked about it in a lot of detail of the things that are on pump tires all being tied to Pulse. So anything that's launched on there, it is burning Pulse. There's all these different mechanisms now to burn Pulse. We already have the Pulse X buy and burn. We already have, you know, the Hex inflation has been slashed. We know that the ink inflation, the same thing. And now there's another protocol that helps burn Pulse. But he talked in detail. I loved his example about the Trump token on Solana. I thought that was a really interesting segment because he talked about like the tokenomics of that, how it launched, and how essentially what needed to happen liquidity wise is you were selling Solana for stable coins, and it's not helping pump the price of Solana. Whereas pump tires, everything that is launched on there out of the many tokens are all going to pump Pulse or burn Pulse. So that seems like such a novel, easy concept, yet not a lot of people are doing it. So I'm interested in those two things here, just how thin the liquidity is that he's talking about, and the giant God candle comment. And then also, pump tires being mentioned so much, and the liquidity going to Pulse instead of stable coins.
Right. So I think that's the big thing. You know, you mentioned it there. That was his big example, was the Trump coin, and how, you know, if you guys remember back to when Hex launched, he was very adamant about making Hex and ETH paired together. Not USDC. He said USDC is for the time in the bear market when you don't want to come down with the other coins. You only want the price performance of the people selling. Now, looking back on that, there was still a lot of sellers, but I don't think people rotated out of the pair like he thought they would, because they didn't take his advice. You know, a lot of people that provided liquidity were providing the ETH and Hex pair, but not at the top, didn't change it to the Hex USDC pair. And it definitely affected the price. When ETH came down, then it came down just as hard, if not harder, because of the Hart's Law. So I think he's probably going to be getting into that a little bit more as far as education goes, when to pair things with stablecoin, when to pair things with the main token, so that you can get price performance out of both. You want people to buy PulseChain first, and then switch into the other token that you're that you're creating, as opposed to what Solana does, whereas you have to buy a stable coin essentially to get into some of these things. And the tokenomics of it are a lot different too, because with Solana, with pump.fun, you know, there was a lot of value extracted out of that in Solana. Whereas pump.tires is set up a completely different way, to where it helps make PulseChain more deflationary. You know, as a model, it's one of the ones that, you know, besides the incentive, it's one of the two coins that essentially, well, I guess Hex is inflationary too, but it's been slashed a lot. I mean, that's one of his goals. This, you know, bear market was to definitely reduce the inflation of everything. And I think pump.tires was definitely a big way to do that, because you've got so much PulseChain now that's locked up in these liquidity pools, being burned whenever they graduate, or whatever you want to call it, over to PulseX.
Mhm.
There's things that are happening behind the scenes where the tokens will never hit the market again. So, essentially, they're not they're not off the market, but they're as good as being burned. So, yeah, definitely some very bullish cases for why the things that he's doing is set up better and designed better than some of the other platforms that are out there, and why. So, I think we can all do a good job of telling people that, hey, you know, come over here, create a token. They can't rug pull it, because there will always be locked liquidity.
Right.
Um, so you're not going to take a complete haircut. Yes, the price could go down, but you will always have liquidity to come in and out with, and that's super important for the degen crowd, for the meme token people that enjoy creating those type of things.
Yes. And yeah, he actually spoke a lot of the idea of, a founder usually creating something like maybe some kind of shiny object for somebody to come get. And many times those things like rug or, because of it being tied to a stable or something like that, and how in this ecosystem, somebody could do that and attract somebody over, and it's all tied to Pulse. And you look at the Most token, obviously, which is a funny, safe meme for a lot of people that don't usually participate in the memes and stuff like that, like Most and Best and stuff like that. Whenever Pump Tires was launched, so yeah, I think that's all very positive for sure. And going off of that point, we'll just answer the question earlier. I'm sorry, I forget who asked it, but it is an interesting thing that multiple people have brought up right here. Iconoclast, how does Richard Hart not mentioning Ink Bode for the coin? It was kind of curious that was the only one not mentioned whenever he mentioned all the other main tokens, including Pump Tires as a platform. What do you think? Do you read anything into that, Ewok? I don't necessarily. I mean, maybe a little bit. Like just into like, well, it's the reward token. It's for rewards, and also right now there's really no farms you want to even really be in because of where
Right.
the APYs are and everything like that. But yeah, what did you read into that, if anything?
That's about all I read into it. Is like, right now he does not want to incentivize people to provide liquidity, because when that happens, it makes things a lot harder to pump.
Mhm.
Um, Ideally, you want it to be as easy to pump as possible, for when the time is right. Things can move in a big direction very quickly. So by not mentioning it, I don't think it was anything um, bad against incentive, because
Right.
when the time is right and when you do want people to add it, I'm sure there will be plenty of farms and pools created to help support the price, to help to help things out a little bit. Just right now is not the time, and I think he was, by not saying anything, pretty clear about that. Is there's no point in talking about it right now, because there's nothing going on with it. I don't want to incentivize people to provide liquidity right now. Obviously, we want things to go up. We don't want to make it heavier. So
Mhm.
I think that's all that it really came down to. That's how I took it anyway. And it didn't, I don't even know that I thought about it, that he didn't talk about it until I had seen somebody else mention it as well. Well, he didn't mention incentive at all. And I'm like, well, there's really no reason to at this point. That's kind of how I took it. He's always been of the type, whether it be the risk diode or whatever it may be, if he doesn't feel there's a reason to talk about it, he won't say anything. So
Yeah.